As we enter LGBTQ Pride Month, 70 Georgia churches are being allowed to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church over the church's stance on LGBTQ inclusion.
Nearly one-third of the congregations in the North Carolina Conference.
Hundreds of Texas Methodist churches officially cut ties.
107 Florida Methodist churches.
Those in support of a more traditional approach to LGBTQ acceptance decided to split into a new global Methodist church based on more conservative ideas.
The United Methodist Church is in shambles. Well, not really, but it is certainly in a weird spot at the moment. If you're uninitiated, the UMC has been dealing, like many churches are, with a conversation around human sexuality and whether or not to allow clergy to perform same-sex marriages, as well as whether to allow openly gay clergy and clergy in same-sex relationships to be ordained and installed as pastors. This conversation has both increased in intensity as well as stalled in recent times due to the angst from both sides, as well as the 2020 pandemic prolonging the time in between general conference meetings, which is keeping the church from officially voting on this issue and handling it once and for all. The reason for the current dynamic in the church is the problem, and it's less about political pressures in the US, though that does obviously play a role, and it's more so to do with the opinions of churches in the international audience, or the audience outside the US. You see, the church in the US is by far and away more progressive leaning than the churches throughout most of the countries of Africa and Asia, where there is still a much stronger stigmatization of the LGBT community.
So that is my support. And as someone who has grown up in our church, as someone who is gay and goes to the least religious college in the US, my evangelism on campus has grown. We have brought people to Jesus because they said they have not heard this message before. They didn't know God could love them because their churches said God didn't.
This dynamic was made really clear at the last General Conference in 2019, which narrowly voted to maintain a more conservative approach to the human sexuality issue, but it was so narrow that the other American churches that lean more conservative are realizing now that they're clearly in the minority, and the UMC in the US overall will continue to push for a more progressive ideology. These conservative churches have opted for an alternative. They're just going to leave. And so now we're in the midst of a tumultuous breakup, with a systematic decimation of the UMC district by district until every conservative UMC church has found a way to escape. And what will be left is a more progressive-leaning group of churches that will continue to decide what comes next, both in respect to human sexuality as well as a host of other issues. And the United Methodist Church is not the only church that is dealing or will deal with this kind of cultural reckoning. Multiple mainline Protestant denominations have been dealing with similar tensions, and it's unlikely that the results will be much different. This also isn't the first time that this church has faced this kind of split. In the 1800s, the Episcopal Methodist Church split into a North and South faction over the issue of slavery, with the South obviously refusing to budge on the issue, and the North demanding some kind of church-wide demonization of slave ownership. And similar to them, other Protestant churches fought over slavery in a very similar fashion, with the Southern Baptist Church still existing to this day, surprisingly so. Similarly, the church has become a catalyst to coming to terms with our politics on a national scale. The example of the church's split over slavery is a damning one. If the last time we split on something so political and foundational, like slavery, we certainly seem to be setting ourselves up for a similar level of animosity between political rivals. It may be that the church is sort of a canary in the coal mine, and our eventual impending national implosion over human sexuality will become so powerful that we will be able to compare it to the civil rights war for generations to come. But besides the inevitable death of civil discourse and the certain rise in violence against gay people, this cultural and religious rift with the United Methodist Church informs how Christianity will survive the next century or so. In the aftermath of other cultural rifts, the church has been able to rebound, and even if both sides of the argument never fully reunite, like the Southern Baptist Church, they certainly have found ways to reconnect with the people and the culture that they inhabit. And even after the political issues subside, we see a neutral religious attitude return over time. But will that happen again? The church is already on the decline in America, especially in mainline Protestant denominations. And there's no real guarantee that either side of this cultural shift in the church can survive once they split all their resources. Further, this split will also inform the direction of the church at large, especially in the non-denoms. After all, non-denominational churches in the US make up a huge amount of our mega-churches, and these churches exist outside the realm of any kind of solid denominational oversight. These churches will be watching extremely closely to how these conservative and progressive divides go, and also how the culture views them afterwards. I firmly believe that whichever side comes out looking better and more popular culturally will be copied. After all, these huge multi-site churches absolutely want to appeal to the largest number of people possible. And if you think that someone like Joel Osteen or Stephen Furtick are going to lose out on some of that sweet, sweet donation money because of some kind of political grandstanding, I don't think you understand how megachurches work. But whichever side of this church-sanctioned culture war comes out on top in terms of attendance and financial backing will inevitably be the way the rest of the church culture flows. Even if that means alienating the rest of the conservative evangelical base, or alienating the entirety of the moderate and progressive sections of the US. In either scenario, we will see a massive shift in Christianity. A shift towards the progressive side will absolutely cause the conservative evangelical church to become more and more insular and cult-like in their behavior. It will likely breed further fragmentation and cause a more polarized view of Christianity, with the conservative churches being more extreme than they ever have been.
Go ahead. Let that Holy Ghost language come up out of you. Go ahead.
If Christianity shifts to the conservative side, we will likely see a solidification of the expiration of the church in regards to the involvement of people under the age of 30, full stop. In either case, we have a litany of negative consequences as a result of megachurches following after popular cultural trends, which who could have really thought, right? I am certain of almost nothing in this, which is what I've realized by writing out this script. But what I am certain of is that we are entering into a tipping point in this cultural divide. Politically, culturally, and yes, even religiously, the way forwards will be difficult and arguably unwinnable. Everyone is going to suffer, is what I'm basically saying. So, real positive outlook on this video. But really, as the United Methodist Church barrels towards this coming finalization of their split at the end of this year, we will see how many churches fragment off of the mother denomination. And in the course of that fragmentation, we will see how the world and the church and the LGBTQ community, which is the issue that we're currently arguing over, responds to everything that I've talked about here.
You guys said you wanted a lot of unity, but you're still denying people. You're still allowing people to be denied marriage because of their sexuality, and I just think that's a really big hole in your logic. So I just want you to explain that a little more.
Sure. So I have a hard time explaining it because I disagree with it. I mean, I agree with you, but I disagree with the position in the denomination. And at the same time, part of what I recognize is 20 years ago, people saw things very differently. Maybe you didn't, but your parents or others saw things very differently. And the question is, how does change happen? That change happens by some people saying, I can't be a part of this and I'm leaving. And it happens with some by spending time getting to know people, building relationships. We have 800 gay and lesbian members in our congregation. My invitation for them is I want people in our congregation who came from more conservative backgrounds to hear your story. I want them to know you. And that's where change happens.
And let me at least leave you with this one positive reaction to all of this. Even if this completely destroys the United Methodist Church, as well as every other Protestant church that has and will eventually split over this issue, and even if this is the church correctly identifying the issue that will become our eventual national destruction, at least these churches are having these conversations. After all, there are so many churches in the evangelical world that are currently sticking their heads in the sand on this issue, as well as ignoring the people in these communities and allowing their voices to become irrelevant. So even if we all self-destruct, at least we got to say we saw it coming. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos in the future about how the evangelical church is a cult and is only getting more insular by the day. And if that doesn't appeal to you, then maybe subscribe anyways and watch one of my older videos. Thanks either way, and I love you guys.